Welcome to the More Than Ganz and Alinsky Power Was Never Just a White Thing series, where we expand the conversation about power building by amplifying voices that have often been overlooked. In this series, you'll hear from powerful Black organizers, leaders, and advocates who are reshaping the future of community organizing. Through their stories, you'll gain insights into diverse approaches to power and learn how their work challenges traditional narratives. Stay tuned as we dive deep into the voices driving lasting change. Let's get started. Y'all, welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy thank you for joining us on a Saturday. We're so grateful, blessed, excited to have you here. And you all, we have one of my favorite people here with us today. So before we jump in, before I introduce them, my name is Charlene Mack Nelson, and we're on day 6 of More Than Ganz and Alinsky. Power was never just a white thing. And it's been a tremendous treat from Jaleesa Evans from the Black Educator Advocates Network to Mark and Mahia Gaskins from the Village Method in Atlanta to Tremel Howard in Louisiana, to J. Artist Wright in Texas. We've heard a plethora of voices, specifically Black voices. Now, you all, Saturdays are going to be dedicated to our co-conspirators. So folks that don't identify as Black, but are critical to the work. So one of the reasons we wanted to put the word not just a white thing is not to exclude other races, but it's to add to the narrative, to add to the brilliance, and also to show that there is some co-conspiring in this work. And when you find those people that are willing to co-conspire, that are willing to build alongside you, to build you up, invest in you, as well as learn along the way, y'all, it can't be a Black thing only. It can't be a white thing only. It can't be a Latinx thing only, Hispanic thing only. It can't be an Asian thing only. And I know those words are heavy and loaded because they're what society has given us, but I just want to name that. It's not about just one color, it's about collective action. So without further ado, I have the privilege of introducing someone, like I said, is near and dear to my heart. I'm going to read his bio and then I'm going to tell you like what my heart is saying. So Matt Hammer is here and he is a seasoned community organizer who was trained by the former staff of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi, aka SNCC, y'all. So y'all, we got some expertise in the room. Learning from civil rights leaders like Ella Jo Baker and Bob Moses. He later founded Innovate Public Schools, a national parent organizing network. Y'all, that takes a lot to do. That's over 10 years old, still running now, and has spent decades supporting climate, housing, education, immigration rights organizations, and training thousands of grassroots leaders to create lasting political change. Matt's work has helped drive progressive political policy victories, and he is a Pahara Fellow and Senior Fellow with the American Leadership Forum. So that's what I condensed down to let you all know about. Let me tell you why I respect this man. Let me tell you why I love this man. There are, and again, I might get emotional, and Matt knows this is, I'm grateful. There are very few people in this work that do things like stand by your side, pour into you, invest in you, challenge you, and create space for you to challenge them when they don't necessarily wear the same skin as you, or they have a different gender as you, or they have a different hierarchical position. I had an opportunity to work with and alongside Matt, and you all, I got to experience a depth of learning, a depth of creativity, a depth of power building nationally that no one has ever given me the opportunity to. So without further ado, Matt, I'm grateful that you're here on a Saturday morning. I know it's early on the West Coast, and so grateful to have you here. So welcome, 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 friend. How are you today before we jump in?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I feel so blessed to be here with you, Charlene, one of my favorite people in the world. I was blessed to work with you for a couple years at Innovate, and we shared so much together, worked together, did a lot of laughing and crying together. and just have learned so much from you and your lovely husband Jamal over the years. So feel really good, and then amazed and feeling very fortunate to see a couple other wonderful
Yeah.
friends, Jaleesa and Spark, on the call. Love y'all, and great to see your names this morning. So.
So Matt, I was about to say Spark, because we know we y'all. If you don't know Spark Bookhart and the dope work he's doing in Kentucky, get into it. All
Yeah.
right, but Matt, I want to focus this time on you. Let's jump right into it. So,
Yeah.
who is Matt, and how were you introduced to power building slash the community organizing work?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I'm the son of the late Phil Hammer and Susan Walker Hammer, who both passed away in the
Mm.
last few years. I'm the brother of Hallie Hammer and Bo Hammer, and I'm the extremely fortunate husband of Michelle Longos, who's been my sole partner for a few decades now. And we are blessed that I can say I'm a dad of Michaela and Mateo, my beloved children who are adults now, young adults, and they've left the nest. And Michelle and I are figuring out what our life is like after that. So
Living your best lives and looking
yeah.
good doing it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I got introduced to organizing. I grew up in a pretty political family where there was just a lot of the discussion over the dinner table. Um, and as I was thinking about sort of on whose shoulders I stand, I thought a lot about this amazing pastor and writer, Black, incredible professor who was in a number of universities, Vincent Harding,
Oh.
who wrote, he was close with Martin Luther King, and he wrote this book called There Is a River.
Mm,
Basically, he says, yes, of course, the history of Black people in this country is very much one of oppression, but just as important is that it is a history from day one of struggle. And so he writes this incredible book that just like chronicles how Black people resisted and struggled really from like the minute people were grabbed, stolen from Africa and put on slave ships, and the resistance began. And it's continued up to this day. And it's this incredible telling of the spirit and extraordinary courage and bravery and wise, smart strategic organizing that is the history of Black people in this country. And it's a history, as we know, that like people have often wanted to erase, and we're in a period of that kind of erasing of that positive,
mm,
inspiring, important, truth-telling history of Black people and other people of color in this country. So I was thinking about Dr. Harding
mm,
um, as I was thinking about so this image he has, the book is called There's a River, and
hmm
its metaphor is like it is a river of struggle, and we're all called to wade into that river. And the pastor in him sort of teaches us that um, there is no guarantee, as hard as that is to really grasp, that we are going to see victory in our own lifetime. We may be some of the lucky ones who do see victory in our lifetime,
mm.
but
Yeah.
we are called to wade into into that troubled river of struggle.
Mm,
Uh, and to know just it can provide so much kind of motivation, encouragement to know that we are in this long history of struggle, and we're standing on so many people's shoulders. And so kind of first who comes to mind for me as I think about on whose shoulders am I standing is my cousin Jimmy,
mm,
who James Carr, Jimmy, older cousin, who Black man who grew up in South LA. When he was in elementary school, his PE teacher, for his own pleasure, would set the Black kids and the white kids fighting each other.
mm,
And he just very racist police in his community, and he ended up channeling a lot of that rage and got into trouble and spent most of his life in the California state prison system. And he was sort of a natural leader and brilliant guy, got his math degree from UC Santa Cruz from the inside, but he'd become a gang leader inside the prison, sort of as survival. Um, and then eventually evolved to become one of the kind of top leaders from the inside
Mm,
in the prison reform movement with George Jackson, who was his best friend. Um, and he came into my life, so they were organizing on the inside for reform, and this was like during the 60s. And he came into my life because my older cousin Betsy, who was a kind of a young activist at the time, white woman, was very involved in the Bay Area prison rights movement,
mm,
and she got to know Jimmy, and they fell in love. And when Jimmy finally got out of prison, they moved into back into the family home in my neighborhood, and had their baby Gia,
mhm,
who's sort of my closest cousin. We grew up together. She was kind of like my sister. And then tragedy struck the family. He was murdered. It was a professional hit in their driveway, a couple blocks from where I was living in the home where my dad grew up. He was murdered. And I was young, but I've got these very like kind of rich
yeah.
and fond memories of Jimmy. Um, and it was only later that I really understood sort of the devastation that that brought onto our family. And so I grew up very much with Jimmy on my mind and ended up getting fascinated by his life and his struggle, and um, went to college and wanted to study about people's movements, basically.
Mhm.
Did my big research paper in college on the California prison system and got to learn more about him and the people that he was working with. Um,
Mhm.
and then I really wanted to like, this was in North Carolina, and I wanted to figure out how to learn organizing.
Mhm.
And
Really, really quick, Matt,
yeah,
what was one of those things you learned
learned from,
from from your studies
yeah.
of the movement before I
Um,
wanted to, and because I don't
I
want to
mean,
skip past that, because
yeah, I mean,
you went head in, like you were not just knee deep, you weren't just wading, you were swimming in the movement water.
yeah,
Curious
yeah.
about
I
like
mean,
what pulled you in.
just um how there was some serious like radical politics inside the California prison system
Mhm.
with and just how communication was happening from inside the prison system and outside the prison system, where there was a lot of also deep, hard change happening in this country. And uh Angela Davis was involved in just all of this. It just felt like there was
Over
uh,
time.
hard questions, deep, hard questions being asked about the structures of racism and its
Yeah.
connection to capitalism. So, yeah,
Thank you for sharing. So you
yeah,
were
yeah.
talking about your journey and when you like came to the East Coast. We won't put coasts against each other. We don't do that. But you talk about coming to the East Coast and then diving into these learnings. So as
Yeah.
you're learning it, I know the story, but could you tell folks around like as you're learning, as you're studying, as you're researching, as you become enveloped into like the history of your cousin and his life and you're learning more about, well, I guess, yeah, and also what your parents were doing, like
Mhm.
what began to motivate you and how did it ground you in like this organizing work?
Yeah. I mean, I just been studying about it in college, and I wanted to like do it. And so I was one of the biggest blessings of my life was I got to know these veteran organizers in Mississippi who'd been on staff with SNCC. So I just struck gold. I was looking for mentors, and I found these incredible three guys, two of whom were on staff with SNCC, and Hollis Watkins and Mike Sayer, and then a bit younger man, Leroy Johnson, who'd been ran this incredible organization in rural Mississippi called the Rural Organizing and Cultural Center. And they were starting this new organization called Southern Echo that was trying to basically like revive the civil rights movement that had stalled
Hmm.
out in a lot of the Deep South and a lot of the Southeast. Um, and they had this vision of just that was just beautiful. I had to sort of beg them to take me in. They'd seen a lot of people cruising through the South looking to have an experience, including some white boys like me who would come down and not really integrate themselves into the community and be part of efforts that were going and led by local people. So I
Mm.
promised that I would mostly shut my mouth and listen, 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 and they agreed to sort of take me in. And I just learned so much over the years from Leroy and Hollis and Mike. They just were doing incredible things. This was a state that had a very, very large Black population, but had been um, systematically kept out of having any real electoral power through the redistricting
Mm.
process. And so after the 90 census, I was there in 92, they had unleashed this incredible community redistricting process around the state uh,
Mm.
that ended up in the whole redistricting process in the early 90s. What it resulted in was doubling the number of districts in the state legislature where you had a good
Wow.
chance of electing a Black person. So for the first time after the 92 election, the white governor and white controlled legislature actually had to negotiate with the Black caucus to make policy happen. They didn't have a majority, but they had enough people that they had to negotiate with. And so for the first time in the history of Mississippi, this was Black, the interests of the Black community had to be considered in making state policy. And it was like, so that happened at the state level. And then also in all these counties, their county boards of supervisors also got redistricted, same deal. And it felt to me like what I was hearing about was starting to emerge in South Africa around just sort of the turning of the tide like this, where
Mm-hmm.
Black people had zero political power to make policy, and then all of a sudden could actually start to make policy. So I remember so vividly election night in November 92. Clinton was
Come
on.
on, Doc. Come on, 92. Come on, dates.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Clinton was on the ballot.
Hmm.
And my job was to be a poll watcher up in Tallahatchie County, which had gone through this redistricting process. And um, this Tallahatchie County, for people may know, was the place that was made infamous. That was the place where Emmett Till,
Hmm.
young, beautiful Black boy, was brutally murdered about 30 years before I was there. That was an important spark in the movement in the 60s. And so my job was to be in this polling place and make sure that um, the election was happening without any strange things going on. That Black people weren't going to be intimidated. The Black people could vote. And then when the polls closed, my job was to follow the ballot box in the back of the pickup truck to the courthouse to make sure that it wasn't swapped out or chucked in the river or stuffed in some kind of way. And so followed the pickup truck on a very dark road, a little scary, to the courthouse, and the courthouse was packed. One side, all the Black people, other side, all the white people. I was one of the few white people standing with the Black community watching the votes get counted, and
Mm.
still remember like it was yesterday, this sort of glares from people across the courthouse about like me as sort of this, I think people imagine me as kind of a traitor to my race or something. And for the first time, Tallahatchie County had always been majority Black, but it never had a majority Black board of supervisors. And so it was like unbelievable power in that was about to shift. And that night, the Black community won a majority on the county board of supervisors, and it was just like this incredible celebration that night that was incredibly moving. And so a lot of this was really made possible because of the the mentor of my mentors
Mm,
was the great Ella Jo Baker. And so she is, I'm sure many people, everybody on the call knows, and it was wonderful to hear Jay, who you interviewed yesterday, speaking about Ella Jo Baker as well. A lot of people don't know her, but she know about her, but she was like this, she was sort of the through line from the 1930s all the way through the 1970s for most of the big, important Black civil rights organizations from NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and then played this vital role in SNCC.
mhm,
And she had trained up Hollis and Mike and lots and lots and lots of other young people in the movement when she was already middle age and was sort of the kind of the grandma of the movement.
mhm.
Um, and she believed she was just a strong critic of the idea of movements built around a few charismatic men. And
Mhm.
she was a powerhouse of a woman who believed, she would say strong people don't
Don't
need
need strong
strong
leaders.
leaders. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, right? And the idea is like uh the movement is just going to be too fragile, and it was proven to be fragile when we're all relying on a couple men at the top. Instead, she believed in like regular everyday people um, learning and
Mhm.
learning how to lead. And she just would, everything she did in all of her roles through the movement was challenging the hierarchy of the movement and trying to create a broad, huge movement of hundreds and thousands of regular everyday people who understood the systems that were keeping them down, knew how to talk to their neighbors, knew how to run meetings small and large, knew how to talk to the press, have political analysis, were out front speaking and leading and growing this movement.
Mhm.
And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And she also had this phrase, I don't know if you can see my shirt, that's
Yeah, of
give
course.
light, give light, and people
Yes.
find the way, right? Give light and people find the way. And she
Keep it PG, Matt. Keep it PG. We don't. I'm just like, just
and
like,
so when she was at the NAACP, she started this series of workshops that trained up all kinds of people. They were called Give Light and People Find the Way workshops. So were enabling regular people to learn and then
mm,
to practice to building power. And just she was this incredible woman who lived out this radical belief that all God's children have enormous capacity,
come
far
on.
beyond what we can imagine around their ability to learn and be creative and understand and lead and do brave things. And she didn't just say those words, she like lived them out, and this woman could bring the house down when she had the mic, and she
Hmm.
sometimes needed to take the mic. But particularly in her last role with SNCC, she insisted on the young people creating
Yes.
their own organization and
Hmm.
would not take the mic and gave them the space to learn and build and grow, and was sort of this buffer between them and the more older parts of the movement.
Hmm.
So anyway, I very much, like so many of us, stand on her shoulders and hope to live a life that um, reflects some of the beauty that she brought into the world. So,
So I wanna, there's so many golden gems in that. And yes, the outcomes are important because we want to make sure like we're creating space for folks to win, both from an infrastructure for power building, how we're developing them as leaders. And it's not just for that win, it's like setting them for the win. But there's also a way of being that you described and how you showed up in the space. And forgive me, I know you might get mad at me for this. I don't want to overlook that. When we talk about community organizers, often folks talk about three traits that they need to be humble, curious, and this ability to like persist, like patient persistence. And
Mm,
I don't want to overlook the fact that you went in to community to be with community and to learn from community and to learn in community in order to better yourself and improve the work. Where I know that you learned those skills under like Mr. Hawkins and the other organizers, but could you say a little more as to how to build power with and why
mm,
and how that connects to what you lifted about the over sometimes how we lean into like the over charismatic leaders sometimes, and we
mm,
get that, and you like you said, like all of God's children has something to be activated within. And we're such at a critical time where that needs to be activated, but we overlook the everyday person because we often say, "I know better for you." Well, have you even asked me?
mm,
Have you
mm.
even tried to leverage my leadership? So
Yep,
I'm
yep.
not sure if that was a clear question, but could you say a little bit more about power with and how that creates stickiness in this movement versus like speaking for people?
Yeah. I mean,
If that's
honestly,
okay.
yeah, no, thank you, Charlene. And I feel like you have always been a great model for that around that it is all about supporting,
Mm,
developing, training up people to be leaders. And it's such an easy thing to say, and it is sadly so still in
mm.
2025. It's a pretty rare thing. There's a lot of people who are sort of still in this mobilizing of like, let's move people around and they do what I tell them to do. And we need everybody to hit the streets now. We need everybody to show up here.
Take
And
a
all of
picture.
the thinking and leadership happens like with a couple of the small number of people. And I don't know, it feels like this last election is hopefully like another lesson for us. Is
Mm,
like it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like,
period.
we need to have communities that are full of people who feel ownership and have the understanding of how they can personally start to get involved and not just click on a petition, not just do something simple, but like
Hmm.
actually get involved. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's the only way that we're going to turn the tide. That's the only way we've really ever been able to turn the tide is when we
Hmm.
can build enough of that. That's got to be driven by lots of regular people.
For
Yeah.
folks that just joined, you've answered all my questions, Matt. But before I'm struggling. This is so good. Before we jump into the power rounds, I just want to introduce Matt again for folks that joined on Zoom and for folks that are on our live stream. So Matt Hammer is with Give Light Consulting. And as you can see, comes from a wealth of experience from his time as a former staffer with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi, and learning under leaders who learned from Ella Jo Baker, and Bob Moses, to founding a national parent organizing institution called Innovate Public Schools, which is still standing today. I think over 10 years, Matt, um, and doing his work around climate justice, housing, education, immigration rights. And we're so excited to have him here. And his work that he's doing now as a consultant, power building consultant with Give Light Consulting. Matt, are you ready for some rapid rounds?
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
All right.
And I just want to lift in the chat. So Spark just doubled down when you mentioned Southern Echo. Oh, and also for folks in the chat, I put in a couple of resources that Matt lifted. There is a river, the Black Struggle for Freedom in America, the link to the book. Also a little bit about SNCC if you don't know about them or if you want to learn more. And then Spark put in double down on what Southern Echo lifted. Also, Matt, not this isn't a bash, but whenever you mentioned 92, Jaleesa said, "Oh, that was the year and month I was born." No. So and also people just saying that you're a true gem and that this is so good. And I hope you feel and understand that love because you are. So okay, let's jump into these power rounds. You
Yeah.
said this
Yeah.
before, but let's maybe you could say the same or something different. A community organizer who influenced you and why.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I would say most importantly would have been those my mentors in Mississippi. So Hollis Watkins and Leroy Johnson and Mike Sayer. And then when I moved, started organizing for years with what's now called Faith in Action
Hmm.
in Oakland and San Jose. Huge influence on me was an incredible organizer named Jose Carrasco, who
Mm.
just really shaped me in a lot of ways. So he was helped build that big national network from the start, and he was
Wow.
an incredible guy. Yeah.
All right, the next one. What's a go-to community organizing tool or practice? What's your
Mm. Um, I think right now in the what is going on in the world right now,
Mhm.
um, I think the most important thing is people getting together.
Come
We
on. Yeah.
call them like house meetings or they're sort of what we call them in the movement, house meetings. But it's just the idea of it is really impossible for most of us to imagine making change if we don't first get into conversation with people. Like it is, I would say like what is most important right now is get with some people and start complaining and crying together and talking about what is not working. And it inevitably unleashes some like
Mm.
creativity and possibility about what we could maybe do together. And it's why tyrants have forever wanted to keep us separate. It's why that
Mm.
freedom of
Come
assembly
on.
is so vital to what's in our Constitution is like tyrants know once you start getting people together and communicating, they can imagine a new world. And so, like, let's get us all like talking with our loved ones and neighbors and figuring out what we could do together.
So good.
Yeah.
Ugh. What is a go-to power building book? I know you shared one earlier, and I know you have a ton.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be
Right.
a favorite, but what's one you would like,
Yeah.
another one you would like to
Yeah.
uplift?
Yeah, that's a great one. And then there's been a couple good biographies of Ella Baker. This is a good one. You can see it.
Yes.
So it's Ella Baker by J. Todd Moy. It's a really
Yeah.
good one that describes some about these Give Light and People Find a Way workshops. It's beautiful. So those are really good.
Okay. And for those in the chat, I just dropped it in. And for those on stream, I'm dropping it in as well. Thank you so much, Matt. All
Yeah.
right, two more questions. So I say this, I always give like a little story behind this question. When it's called, what's your best practice to create space for rest? And the reason I ask, and I keep telling this because I want folks to learn, we had a really dope opportunity to train some EDs who were formerly incarcerated. And they talked about Harriet Tubman being
Mm,
like and there are many reasons people lived Harriet Tubman as like a go-to role model, but theirs was a different reason that I had ever heard before. Theirs was because she lived long with the movement. And I was like,
mm,
dang, I never thought about it that way before. Like being able to grow old with the movement. And I shouldn't say old or grow seasoned. And so there's this misconception that you have to like just you have to sacrifice all the things you can't eat if the work doesn't get done, but I want to like you can create space for rest. You can create
mm,
space to like give the load to the next generation. So I'm curious for you, Matt, and you have some really dope practices that you've done. What is the
mm.
best practice to create space for rest in this power building movement?
Thank you for that, Charlene, and for bringing it back to Harriet Tubman. I mean, for me, like, it is so much about kind of some regular daily practices that I have
Well, that's good.
around just keeping care of my physical body, and really. Um, I have a daily meditation and prayer practice, and that is fed often by opportunities I've had to do longer meditation retreats up to like 10 days in silence that just fills up my tank and gives me a lot of strength to come back and into the world and do the work in a way where I can lead as much with heart and love as a lot of the other emotions that no doubt come up in this work of anger and those sorts of things. So I would say that that's been a big part. And then I've got some very special spiritual teachers who have blessed the world with podcasts. And I find when I'm going through really difficult times, I pop those in and sort of it reminds me, and I need those like several time a week reminders about what is in fact most important. And, hitting middle age has helped me realize like we're all gonna die. I'm gonna
Mm,
die. And take every day as as a blessing, as a
mm,
blessing. Yeah.
so good. What is it? There was some of the seasoned folks, elders in the South would say, "This world is not my home. Like I'm just passing through." Um,
Mm,
and it takes more, like you said, it takes a different meaning, more meaning every day.
mm,
Last piece, and you said a little bit of this earlier. The last rapid rounds question is, what's a piece of advice for community organizers in today's political climate?
mm, mm. So, it is really hard to do what I think is like the most important part of organizing is getting out of your off the screen and talking with people face to face.
Mm.
And when I was learning up organizing, the expectation was you'd be out talking to people face to face in church basements and in their kitchen, over the kitchen table, wherever, like having 15 or 20 of those conversations every week with people to grow the movement, to support the people who are becoming leaders. Um, and that is a really hard thing to do, particularly now, particularly after the pandemic, where people got used to doing a lot of important movement building in front of a computer screen,
Yeah.
often like with the jammies on. And it's good that we can do some work by compute on the computer screen, but I would say the most important thing for people to do right now, if they aspire to organizing or want to help build this beloved community, you got to get out and talk to people face to face. And not necessarily just random people at a door, but like having real conversations with folks, what we call one-to-ones. So there's an organizing principle that says, when in doubt, do a one-to-one.
Mhm.
And that has been the sort of foundational practice of everything that I have done in this work that is much more about listening, a little bit of talking, but a whole lot of listening. So, yeah.
Y'all, with Matt Hammer, y'all, I'm so grateful. Matt, thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. I know
Mm.
you're a husband, you're a parent, you're a leader in this work. You're juggling campaigns on both the East Coast and the West Coast and in between with Give Light Consulting. I do not take for granted your time on this Saturday. Thank you for the beauty that you bring to this work. Thank you for creating space to uplift, elevate, and to acknowledge and pour into not just the Black leaders that poured into you, but continuing to do that. And thank you again for who you are. So, everyone, Matt Hammer, Give Light Consulting, seasoned organizer, and y'all we'll start back up on Monday. I'm super grateful but blessed that we get to do this work alongside dope people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I actually will read this in the chat. So Matt, Jaleesa said, Matt definitely models what it means to get out of the way of Black folks and contribute to their movement. He helped us incubate Bling, the Black Educator Advocates Network, and helped us establish relationships with foundations. You deserve all your flowers today.
Oh, thank you, Jaleesa. And you are an incredible leader, as we all know on this call. And Bean is doing such incredible things. I was blessed to be able to work alongside you a little bit a few years back. So, Charlene, and thank you for making this space
Of
and for lifting
course.
up this beautiful topic of for this month. Really appreciate your leadership on this and all the incredible work you're doing.
No problem. And thank you for the conviction. Thank you for the wisdom. And thank you for the history lesson. I feel like there's a part two needed.
All right. All
Thank
right. Take
you.
care, y'all. Thanks so much.
Hey, hey, hey. Before you leave, click the subscribe button to follow 2541.